I'm at the stick store this morning, aka my brother's property, and I got a great idea for a chair. I want to get started on it today, but you know I've got to replenish my stock. I got to keep a constant flow of beech coming in, and I don't take a lot at a time because it takes so long to strip it, and so I'm out looking for special pieces today. I'm looking for specific sizes, diameters. Maybe I'll get lucky and find some real cool pieces. But I thought maybe I'd drag you along for a minute this morning, get out in the woods, get some fresh air, and then we'll get started building the chair. I try and find what I can and get off the property before the sheriff shows up. My name is Roy McKinney, and welcome back to the Naked Beech Studio. Nestled in the beautiful mountains of Brown County, Indiana, the Little Smokies of Hoosier Land. I like contrast. I really like that ebony and ivory look. I'm going to start with a walnut slatted seat. Some furniture just looks better naked.
Is sugar-free, alcohol-free, and decongestant-free. Full high blood pressure. At daytime, not drowsy, coffee, aching, fever, sore throat, cold, flu, or high blood pressure. What do you got?
When I decided to do this whole dot matrix thing with this chair, I mean, how hard could that be, right? I think everybody loves walnut. It's just absolutely gorgeous. When I see some of this stuff on other YouTube channels, Blacktail Studio, Four Eyes, different ones, so many of them, they're using walnut in their river tables and so forth. And the walnut they're using, this is the biggest thing that impresses me. The walnut slabs that they're using just a few years ago was called firewood. One of the more difficult parts about making this chair is drilling the mortises. Even with a brand new Forstner bit or paddle bit, whatever you choose to use, they're very difficult to hold the chair perfectly still, or the sticks, I should say, in order to drill those mortises directly across from each other as close as you can possibly get them. So I made this video in January, right around my birthday, and it's cold as kraut. But I've been off work now for several weeks. It's given me an opportunity to make a few chairs, have some fun in my little shop. But the reality is I'm going to be going back to work pretty soon. Hopefully in a few weeks I'll get out there and start pounding nails again. So this will probably be the last harvest that I do this winter. I'll wait till spring, till the sap starts to come up. The bark will come off a little bit easier. And then I'll get back over to my brother's property and rape and pillage and collect a bunch of sticks. If I get it in the spring and get it stripped and get it up in the racks, it'll air dry and I'll have less seasoning cracks. And that way this winter I'll have plenty of stuff to play with. I don't use a lot of tools. I don't use a lot of big fancy power tools. But you know, I have to have tools. I just don't particularly have to have the best tools, and I don't see me personally spending everything I could possibly make on tools to do what I do. My tools are just that. There's something to be used. Yeah, I keep them sharp. I don't spend all day long sharpening a chisel because I just don't use them that much. About halfway through this project, I started getting a little dot dizzy. I'm not real good at the repetitious work, but in my next chair, I'm going to do something that I don't think has been done. I haven't found it anywhere on YouTube. Now I realize that saying you're doing something that you don't think has been done is kind of like saying, you know, you discovered America. It's, so, but all I'm saying is I have not seen it done anywhere on YouTube.
Michaelis happens to help you through it. Call 844 Big Cindy.
It's real important when I'm boring these mortises that they're right across from each other as best I can. You can see that I'm starting the hole on the opposite side, and then I'll get down and get parallel with it as best I can, and I'll aim the rear of my drill sort of back at me at the level of the hole. And if you get within just a little bit, then there's usually enough tolerance in the curvature of the stick, of each stick, that I can rotate that stick in the hole until it lines up on the other side. And I'll say 99% of the time, this turns out to be true. So that's your challenge when you're drilling these holes. I'm using a 5/8 Mortise and Tenon on this chair. So far my alignment has worked out really good on this chair. I haven't had any issues with it. Everything seems to be lining up really nicely, but it's real important to dry fit all the framework first before you glue it up. And once I've got it dry fitted and marked at each location, then when I go to glue it up, everything should come right back together. Speaking of tools, you'll notice the little joiner by my table. That's an early 1950s model Craftsman that was sitting in my nephew's garage that had been given to him. It was covered in rust. The motor would turn on, but everything was really a mess, and he had no use for it and wanted to know if I could get it out of his garage, and I just happened to be, timing was pretty good. So after stripping it completely down, painting it, and new blades and the whole bit, it runs like a top. It's a beautiful little joiner, and it's all I need. I love it. Okay, right about here is where my pucker needle goes to about 8 on my sphincter meter. I'm using Titebond 3 glue, which gives me about 15 minutes glue up time, but you still have to really kind of be on top of it if you're going to get this glued up, especially a ladderback like this with so many parts, to get it glued up before things start to dry. And as on any mortise and tenon, you're going to get some glue squeeze out, and in my case, since I'm not staining it, then I'm going to take a nice little damp rag and I'm going to wipe all those joints off so that I don't have to chip it all off and sand it all off later. Once I've got a section of the frame dry fitted, like I do the front legs here, before I disassemble it to make the glue up, I try and mark the holes really lightly with a pencil, and so that at least one hole, I don't have to do both sides, and this way when I go to remake my alignment, I've got something to line up. There's two marks, and you have to kind of babysit those marks all the way through the rest of the process so you don't wipe them off, but I don't usually have any problem with it. You know, if you're not familiar with tenon cutters and if you've not done a whole lot of shop work, I need to just give you a quick warning that you need to have a way to lock that tenon in pretty good, because once that tenon cutter gets a hold of that hard wood, it's going to flip and flop that thing all over the place and it can fly out of a vise. So just make sure it's got locked in good. I've had them come out of there and it's a little intimidating when you first step up to it and don't know what to expect. But if you've got the stick locked in good and if you've got a good hold on your drill, and then a good smooth, you don't force it onto the stick. You just push slightly, allow it to cut, allow the blade to cut. You always allow a blade to do the cutting. You don't make the tool do it. So I can't stress that enough. And you'll get past the intimidating part and you'll cut beautiful tenons. Now this final glue up can be a little stressful. You need to have all your parts laying right there on the end of every part. I know exactly what hole it goes into. I have my alignment marks. I've made sure they're in place. I've got my glue poured out in a little thing. I've got my little Q-tips or whatever you're going to apply your glue with. I have everything I need to make this. My clamps are handy. And before I ever put the first little bit of glue on, because you've got to glue those holes. I add a lot of glue in the mortise or in the mortise part, and then you've got enough time if you work steadily and smoothly to get this glued up without any problem. Get the clamps on it.
This offer won't last long. Visit your local Verizon store to switch and save big today. Minimum $599.99 up to $659.99 device payment or full retail purchase with
The actual tip of each tenon is penetrating about 3/4 of an inch into the mortise, clear up to what's called the shoulder, and that's where it'll widen out and it's going to stop no matter what. And if you try to get that to where each tenon does go clear to the shoulder. It doesn't always work out that way, and that's okay, because of the irregularity of each stick. That if you're trying for that type of precision, it's good to try, but if you don't accomplish that level of precision, it's not a big deal. If you're an eighth of an inch less and you're penetrating that mortise, it will still glue up fine and it'll hold. And if you'll notice, I have plenty of joints that stabilize my chair. I've seen a lot of the Windsor chairs and different types that got like, 6 joints in the whole chair, and I go, man, I don't know what keeps somebody from wobbling that down to pieces. But on a good hardwood like this Beech with a good tenon, and if you've got the majority of the tenon in the hole and glued up, and you have so many joints, this chair is not going anywhere. All right, we're going into the finale stage on this chair. Now would be a good time, if you haven't already done it, to please push that like button and subscribe to the channel.
Sponsored by Progressive Insurance. Looking for a career you'll love with flexibility, great pay and benefits, and one of the country's top workplaces? Come join.
I'll pour a little epoxy around the feet now and get those leveled out really good. And then we're going to move on and put some oil on that seat. Yeah, baby. I want to take a second to thank my 17-year-old granddaughter for creating my Naked Beech logo and emblem. She did a wonderful job. She's very creative in her own right. She has an Etsy channel and probably TikTok or something of that nature. But she crochets. She actually writes patterns for crocheting, and she's just a very creative artist at 17 years old. So thank you, granddaughter. The black emblem of Naked Beech, the separate emblem, is a 3D printed creation made by my 23-year-old grandson. So it's kind of a family affair right now. My granddaughter and my grandson were both very involved in the making of my logo, and the 3D piece is embedded in epoxy into each chair that I produce, each piece that I produce, so that it's there for eternity. I'm using an antique Danish oil, and that's what I typically use on all my chairs. The beech being very white, I like the color hue that the antique Danish brings to it. I appreciate you watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Until next time, be safe.